So, Tom, are we live?
We're live. Okay.
Now I have the most difficult job on hand, that is introducing Satsang. So, as you can see, actually the table masks the name Satsang. So his name is Satsang. Actually, it's quite odd in India to call Guru by name. I am forced to write it because that's how he is known in the West. But we in India wouldn't prefer to call our even dad by name, isn't it? We call him dad, we call mom, we call Guru as Guru, or as Babaji or something else. We don't call him by name. But it has been practiced, so I don't like it. I usually personally I call him Babaji. So, for all of you say, his name is Satsang. His name tells it all. His name is Sat and Sri. He is well, he is Sat. So the truth, absolute truth, he is as well. Before I delve into Sat Sri, let me first introduce Satyamai, who is Mrs. Sat Sri.
I like that.
She is embodiment of truth. She is Satyamai. She is embodiment of truth. She is the driver, the vehicle, the nuts and bolts of New Dharma. She is the one who drives New Dharma. She is the single principle who drives New Dharma. We are all very grateful for her for the manifestation of suffering in the universe of the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now,
Can I use this for the recording? Yeah.
From today morning, when I gave messages for all you, for many people to come, they were asking me, what is his lineage? What philosophy does he follow? And so many questions. So I said, please come to with an open mind. You don't need a Baba to follow or book to follow, nothing. Please come with an open mind to know the absolute truth. That's what. So for me, because I want to tell you what is my experience, what I have not known through experience, I will tell you only my experience. He is not a physical body as it appears to be according to me. He is just a window appearing like a physical body. That window is very, very transparent. It transmits the absolute truth more than 100%, I think so. So he is just a window. He is just a window to the truth. So that's what is called Sat Sri. That's his wealth. That's his rich. He is the absolute transmission of truth. There was an interview Buddha at the gas pump called Bat Gap interview, which drew most of his devotees to him. So in that, the Rick Archer asked him, what is the qualification of someone to come and see you? He said, liberation. Liberation is the qualification of someone to come and see Sat Sri. That's why you don't see him often, because you don't see anyone doing asanas, breathing exercises. So when you are at PhD level, you need PhD stuff. You don't do all the gymnastics of breathing and gymnastics of exercises to know the truth. Truth is known by transmission from a liberated guru. So that's what is called Sat Sri.
then same question since the morning. If you want to know about the Guru, don't look at the Guru.
3 years back, I had the same questions which all of you or most of you had. So I said, don't look at the Guru. Look at what effect he causes on the people around him. Does he produce liberated souls? Does he push liberated souls to the absolute? Does he bring them back to the body? Only, not just a liberated soul, but only a master can do this. And the last 3 years with him, I found some people are sitting among you. I don't want to name them. who in front of my eyes, in 2 years, I have seen such a transformation in them that it's not just liberation, it's something more than that. That is the effect he can cause among the people who are linked with him. So that's the reason why I beseech all of you to come here. It's just to know which is something which is not found normally. It's so precious. So the qualification to come here is doing a PhD. It's not LKG stuff. So I congratulate all of you. You are already enrolled in the PhD program. So that's it. Now comes the opportunity. Opportunity for me and for all of us to know this absolutely precious and rare being in the universe, to know about him. So I leave the stage to the master, Satsang.
Namaste. So welcome. How many is this the first time you've sat or heard, first time you've been with me? Raise your hands. Okay, so most of you. So I figured you're drag-alongs. Others who know me have dragged you along to introduce you to Satri. So you may not have any real orientation to what Srinivas was talking about, but maybe. So I'll just share a bit of our story. Satchmai can step in on this. Back in 1998, I was an architect for 25 years. I was an architect in the United States for 25 years. My wife worked in nonprofits. She founded and helped develop and raised monies for nonprofit organizations in the United States. We both lived in the high desert near the Sierra Nevada mountains, which divide eastern California from the state of Nevada. We lived in a beautiful place. I had an older son. She had a daughter. She's my third wife. I had not a clue of anything spiritual in my life. I was happy with my life. I had figured it out. I was very involved in my community. I was very committed to community concerns. I was very much pulled to renewable energies. I was felt connected to the planet and the whole issue of what now has become climate change. And so I was just a good human being, both of us, good human beings. And late one night, 20 years ago, while I was working on my architectural project, because I had, that's when I did my drafting work, was at night, because I had so much to do in the day, I could only do my architectural work at night. And a great anguish rose in me. I didn't know what it was. At first, it felt like something was wrong physically. And then it started rising up in my body, and it became an anguish. I didn't know what it was because it wasn't coming from an emotional base. It wasn't coming from a mental base. And although when I was young, I did lots of psychological work and was familiar with the teachings in the West of psychology, I had nothing of that coming up in my personal life. So it was unusual, and it was unusual in the intensity. And it grew more and more intense until there was anguish. An unspeakable anguish. I didn't know the nature of it. I thought it was other things. But what it did is it reached a crescendo, and I pierced through the boundary of my human identity. I just pierced through it, and it was so intense, I could not hold my consciousness, and I was woke up sometime later on my drafting board. I'd collapsed on my drafting board. And I came out of this anguish into this domain of consciousness, a domain of being in existence in the entire universe that was unspeakable, beyond awe. No words, no frame for it. I had no preparation, although I had, when a young man, I had experience with alternative drugs and such, nothing like that. This was something of extraordinary different domain. And I came back from it, and I knew at the instant that it happened that it was a miracle. A miracle that is something you cannot expect. It's something you cannot know until you know it. You can only have an idea of it or a felt feeling for it. So I didn't know what it was that had happened, except when I went upstairs and I walked into our bedroom. After some time, I went up there, and Satsang sat straight up in bed. She was asleep. It was late. She sat straight up in bed. Tears were flowing down her face. And she said, "What's happening? What's happening?" That was the beginning. I went to work the next day. I thought it was just one of those peak experiences people have. I didn't put too much credence on it. I hadn't been meditating. I hadn't been doing any spiritual anything. So I went back to what I knew in my life, and I had a great week. I felt really good. I really liked Satsang, which is really different, because before I was having a hard time. I was really cranky for about a month and a half before this happened. 3 months, okay. She's a better tracker of that side of the fence. And the next weekend, which I stopped working, and my wife and I and our daughter went to a movie, and we're driving home from the movie, and it was like 400 pounds of bliss came into my body from the top of my head and filled my whole body with bliss that was so intense that when I would blink my eyelash, it was ecstasy. And I'm driving a car. So it was like, I didn't know I was driving a car. I was completely enthralled with having a body filled with this much bliss. And she said, "Stop driving." She told me to go out of the car, and that's when I really discovered how out of it I was as I waddled around the car to sit in the passenger seat when she took us home. She drove us home, and I went upstairs and I sat in a comfortable chair, and for about 6 hours, the universe made love to me. It was so loving. It was so passionate. It was so intimate. I had no idea that God was that personal, that God was that intimate, that was so physical. It was so much in my body that it was clear something loved me more than I could possibly know. And that I'll open to that other aspect that's beyond the threshold of what we know, which was the personal expression of God. The first awakening was an impersonal expression, less individualized. But this one was, I was loved by something beyond this dimension. After about 4 to 6 hours, it quieted, and I went to bed, and I went to work the next week, and so it happened again. And every time I was not working, which I worked very hard, it would come in again and again and again, until finally, after some months, we both figured out nobody could tell us what this was. Our Buddhist friends, our other spiritual friends, people who had gurus, they could say, well, it sounds like a transmission from a guru or energy, but there was no person, no guru that I knew of. It was just happening spontaneously. And one part of that time is I recognized, because I asked the question, why did this happen? Why did this happen? I wasn't looking for it. What's the principle that would allow for such a thing to happen? Because I certainly didn't deserve this. It's okay, it's background music. You can turn off your phone or leave it on, but we're going to include everything. But it let me know that whatever I had known of life was not adequate, that there was a purposeful movement or maturation that I had gone through, not knowing I'd gone through, and I believe all of us humans are going through. that get us to a point where we open up to that which is beyond human, which is divine, which is the subtle worlds. And that also let me see all of existence in a complete different vantage point. It was a recognition that there is a purposeful consciousness, intention, that is moving all of existence, that I could see it from the most primitive forms of life, becoming more and more awake until it could become fully self-awake, as each of us are. Each of us have that quality of consciousness, aware that we exist. And the thing I like to say about that is there anybody in this room who doesn't know they exist? Please raise your hand. Now, you may not have understood that in English, but it's quite plain. Do you exist? And how do you know you exist? Your consciousness tells you you exist. I am. I exist. I'm here. You may have a story about it. You may have a history. You have a name and a sex and a life. But the essence of it, the proof of your own existence, needs no proof. You exist with no need for proof. That's what truth is. Truth is that fact, that you exist, even if nobody's around here to know, around you that knows you exist, even if you don't have a name, even if you're not who you thought you were, there's still this existing going on, and you're the one who knows you're existing. That quality of us, that essential sense of what I like to say, what we are versus who we are. Or the who is our personal self, our story, our history, our belief, our job. The what we are is something pure, essential, elemental. This quality is eternal. This quality of that sense of self that you now have was never born and never dies. It has a body now, has a story now, has a family, has a future, had a past, has a past. But that quality, that essential quality of you is eternal. And that quality in you is what's living you. You may think it's yours, but actually it's all of us. We all share that one quality. And it's all coming into individual consciousness through all of us, each of us. Each of us are unique expressions of that one intentional, purposeful current of consciousness coming into existence. This is what Sat Shri means. It's truth manifesting. We are all expressions of that truth. So that knowingness, that recognition, it was a recognition. That let me know that even though I didn't understand all the pieces of how we have evolved and what is it that now I know this, I didn't know what that meant. I knew that I had met the fundamental truth, a fundamental truth. And the foundations of my teachings, the foundation of everything I do comes from that recognition that we're all on a purposeful current. It's taking us someplace that we cannot possibly know from our ordinary human embodiment. And that this was what the spiritual path was all about. It wasn't about the striving and the struggling and the techniques and the yoga and the mantras and the pranayams and all of this. It was about a naturally unfolding process of consciousness, that when the fruit became ripe, it blossomed. And that quality would open up to the universe, and the universe would step right in and let you know your truer nature. It would let you know you weren't just this little you. You're not just this thing you think you are, this person, and story, and family, which is always trying to be loved, trying to be safe, trying to have it your own way. All of these things are phantasmorical distractions from that essential truth of what you are. That is never born, never dies. It comes and reveals itself naturally when you're ready. So I had no tradition. I was raised a Catholic, but it was in the background. There was no expression for what had happened to me. And this didn't stop. The force would come in through my body so intensely. I'd be like a fly on the wall. and I felt like I was a piece of plumbing. And this force was coming through me, and I was just, oh my God, what is this energy? What is this energy? After some time, with our search, we found a person who later became my teacher, spiritual teacher. His name was Sri Apananda. He's from Odessa. And his family raised him as a Brahmin. His mother's side and his father's side both had priests. And he had chanted the Gita. That was his technique. He was a chief financial controller officer for Maharishi Yogi for 5 years. And then this awakening overtook him, and it was much like mine in that he became intoxicated, left his family and his 3 children, and wandered India, ended up in Pondicherry, and was taken under the wing of one of Sri Aurobindo's closest disciples, who eventually sent him to Mount Arunachala to stay in a cave for some days. And while he was in that cave, the same thing that happened to me had happened to him. He came out, however, devastated. He had no organized ego. It happened all at once. And for some years, he was barely functional. But after some years, he came to the United States, met an American devotee, and she brought him to the United States to a place that was only about 45 minutes from my house. I didn't even know he was there. He had come 3 times before I became aware of him. Somebody gave me a video of him, and I saw the video, and he was talking about the soul. And this was 2.5 months or so into this process that I was going through pretty continuously. And I went into a state of ecstasy that was beyond all words. I was almost like a madman. Here I am, an architect, a professional person with a wife who's a professional person, and I am acting in this ecstatic, devotional enthrallment, just watching a picture of this Indian guy talking. But there was something in me that responded so strongly to what he was that I knew in that instant I needed to be with him. There was nothing more important than to be with him. So that very next day, we went up to the little place he stays in periodically, once every couple of years. And I shared this with his main American devotee, and she didn't know what to advise me or anything, but she called my teacher, and the next day when I came up, he gave me instructions. He basically said, yes, I know who he is, and tell him to drink lemon juice and hot water with honey. Typical Indian. Solve all your problems with food, right? So, funny thing is, it worked. And I felt at that moment when I listened to him on the audio tape, because she had to record it because it was a different time zone. And when I listened to that, my whole system quieted, and a resolve came, a determination came. There was this complete alignment in my person with what I had experienced. Like there was nothing now in the way of me being with him. So it took 9 months. He came 9 months later, came in October. Satsang and I both went there and met him when he came off the airport. And at that point, I was in planes of consciousness where I had been meeting him regularly. Some of you have that experience with me, where you meet me in these planes of consciousness. So when he came off the airplane, it was no big deal. But for Satsang, she fell to her knees. And she started, you want to? No. She became intoxicated in the energy of him. And he saw that. He saw me and he saw her. And he knew that we were destined to manifest something more than either of us could know at that moment, being Westerners and husband and wife. He initiated us both together, along with my brother and my mother, about a month later. My mother showed up. She crashed the party. She wanted to find out who was this guy. She had 5 sons, and 3 of them were pulled to him. She said, who is this guy? She crashed the party, and she fell in love with him. So I know the lineage came from my mother. It was first generation Italian, about as close to Indian as I need to know. All heart. So he said to us that you are the Shiva speaking to me, and you are the Shakti. He will not be able to manifest without you. And without him, you will not be the Shakti. But together, you'll be the Shiva Shakti. Somehow she knew this. One part of her personality knew this. The other part of her personality was losing her best friend and her husband and the provider and the guy who fixed the plumbing and the guy who helped pay the bills and make sure things happened on time. She was going to have to take over the running of the household as I left with my teacher. And it ended up for 6 years. We went to Tiruvannamali, where he had a small, funky little ashram right there in the early days when it had only been about 3 years. And I stayed there for the most part of 6 years. Now that is an interesting time. Because although I was a Westerner, I brought with me an ability to directly experience everything. So he made me a Brahmin. I had the string. I did all the ceremonies. And I performed the 1,000 names of Vishnu every single day for most of my time there, off and on. Coming back to the United States periodically, and in that time, because I could experience everything, I felt the mantras. When I would go to the temples, I could experience the temples. I could feel the huge, subtle structures that support the Indian Hindu tradition. And everything was wonder. And I became very familiar that in this tradition, this is already known. In the Vedas, and especially the Bhagavad Gita, was describing the fact that this whole thing was already understood. And they were using that initial body of information that came from the original rishis, which is what I was. I'm like a rishi. I saw it all, but they had already seen it thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. So the Vedas became a rich basis for me to match an understanding with my experiencing. So what I've used and what my teacher used was the Bhagavad Gita, this little blue book, which he translated from Sanskrit. And he translated in a unique way, in that he's describing the Gita, which is, I consider, like a Reader's Digest, condensed version of the Vedas, as a description of the journey of consciousness when it awakes to its true nature, the beginning of the return journey of consciousness. And that the 18 chapters of the Gita describes 18 steps or stages that each soul goes through as it develops towards the fulfillment of its purpose in existence. So to this day, I teach the Bhagavad Gita, but I use it as a frame for languaging my direct experiential understanding. After those 6 years, my teacher gave me a spiritual name. At that time, it was Siddhartha. And he asked me to open a spiritual center in the United States, in Sacramento. And for the next 3 or 4 years, I played the part of a spiritual teacher. And so much became revealed in that process. Satsang lived someplace separate. We would visit periodically. She would come down and stay a few nights, and while I'm doing programs. And during that time, I went through a process independent of my teacher, where I became absorbed into samadhi states that would last for days. Literally, I would go into the state. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before, beyond the subtle world, beyond the gods, beyond the enchantments of the Middle Kingdom. I had no idea what it was. Nobody could tell me what it was. And I would go into it, and I'd open my eyes, and 12 hours would have gone by, 20 hours would have gone by, and I felt like I just sat down. That I had gone into a place where I didn't know, and this lasted for 3.5 years. It occurred about 3 times a week, where I'm gone for a day or two, and I'm trying to run a center while this is going on. So whatever that was, I now know what it was. Eventually, when that ended, I had a realization that I am that. I am the Guru. It was on Guru Purniyam Day, 2017. And I recognized that for whatever reason, that everything that was now well understood here in India was manifesting itself in this Western body. Now, this was nothing but wonder, awe, bliss, fulfillment, unspeakable gratitude. And the fact that it never went away, kept growing, it became evidence to me that this was pointing to a possibility for all us, for all of mankind. And so after I declared that, it was finished, my teacher recognized it finished, I gave myself a name, and Satsang and I organized New Dharma on the principle of the Gita, where during periods of darkness, I come again to destroy the evil, to strengthen the virtue, and to reestablish Dharma. So then I knew my mission. And then that's been pretty much what we've been doing for the last 20 years last 14 years, been manifesting this mission. We've just come from a 6-day retreat in Tiruvannamali, a six-week retreat in Tiruvannamali with 60 people from all over the world. This is a layover as we go to Rishikesh for 2 weeks, and then we'll go right back to the United States for a period of time. Then we'll travel to Europe. We're doing this continuously. I can't tell you how many times I've had this talk. But the principle is that I recognize that if you can link up to the force that comes through me, that something you can't know comes to you. And it's not something I do. It's like I was designed to be the plumbing for things that would not normally be accessible to human beings. And as Srinivas says, people's lives change in ways you can't know. Surprises me. Without any particular yoga, without any particular practice. Those were all practices, right? Practice isn't doing the thing itself. It's practicing to do the thing itself. So you practice yoga so you can meditate. You practice yoga so you can do yoga. You can be yoga. So no practice is required here, except you've got to learn how to collaborate with a yoga that happens automatically when you connect to this force, which is a different kind of yoga. It's like a yoga of letting go, a yoga of being opened and surrendered, a yoga of using your intelligence to discriminate and to begin to know that your body is the one that can give you the most true information about your own spiritual awakening. And much of my teachings is learning how to sensitize ourselves into our body and into our heart, into our being, instead of living in our head, living in our understanding, living in our explanation, which most spiritual teachings are about. But I understand and I recognize that understanding allows us to be conscious collaborators with the process. So this is what I teach. So on our website is the recordings of the 18 chapters, where I use the translated verses and I expand on them in my own experience. And these are free to the whole world. So the idea here is that it's opening a listening for the possibility of what you are as a human being, waking up to your divine nature and learning how to collaborate with that process consciously. Learning how to recognize the stages and the challenges and the traps, as well as the attacks that occur as we step out of the boundary of our little ego, our little selfish, narrow, shallow, unexamined self. We break out of the box of who we were. We discover this wonder of what we are in the process. I draw from Sri Aurobindo and his teachings. Sri Aurobindo talked about the supramental force coming into the collective consciousness. He taught his people how to open up to the supramental force. I believe, my feeling is very clearly that I am a manifestation of the work that Sri Aurobindo and the mother did in Pondicherry in the turn of the 20th century, and that this is now a new possibility for mankind, and that I am an expression of that, and people who are coming to me are also becoming expressions of that, receptacles, channels, instruments for this direct experiential force to come into them. So the old yogas can get in the way because we think we're doing it. We think it's something we have to deserve. In one sense, it's true, but it's not for the reasons you think. It's not something you accomplish. It's not something you get. It's something you find that's already here. It's a love. It's a sense of coming home. It's a sense of safety. It's a sense of intimacy with God, with truth, as a felt and known and recognized experience that over the years can grow and grow as long as you align your life to stay listening to it. So the Gita is a song. It's singing continuously. It's all about us. And what does it sing? Well, one of the words for it is grace. Its singing is calling to the soul within each of us, and our soul can hear it even if our ego can't hear it, even if our mind can't hear it, even if our heart's too closed, too caught in fear and worry and need, can't hear it. But this path is about becoming able to receive that song that's been singing the creation all along, to bring it in and to feel it and let it have its way until we become singers of the song ourselves. So there you have it. Now you don't maybe know you have it. I don't know how much you've been able to follow me. I know many of you can understand English. I don't know if I spoke too fast or not. Or how many people could understand me as I spoke? I just out of curiosity. Okay, most of you. Okay. It helps for the mind to understand because our minds in being the modern world are more open and more trained to receive the song. But the mind takes it over and uses it for something other than it is. For some of you, your heart can sense this, a recognition of the truth of what's being spoken in front of the room that happens in your body, happens in your heart. If you notice right now, you may notice that your mind is quieter. It's good to just take a moment and just notice what you're being in your own body with yourself and see if you can tell if you've been able to receive something, because it'll be a quieting of your mind, an opening of your heart, and a relaxation in your body. So just see if that's there. Okay, there you have it. That's pretty much all you really need to know. We'll see what else happens. I understand some people are going to come forward and ask me questions, so we'll allow that to happen. There are things that can be done if you feel a pull to this, including going just to our website and listening to the recordings on both the Gita and the Mother Book, which I also revealed. They're all free on the website. We have a new book that we've published on the first 6 chapters of the Gita, where the revelations are included with the verses, describing what the verses that I experienced, the verses were pointing to. I traveled the whole journey, so I know the nature of the trek you have to go on. I know how challenging it can be. I know how discouraging it can be. And I know that when I meet you, that I can see the track you've traveled so far, and I also can see the track you have yet to travel. And that would be what I do as a guide, but I also am training other people to who have come to the sufficient development themselves to guide other people in the unfolding of that process. But how do you know this is relevant for you? Is if you can recognize what's being spoken. If you can feel it or in some way know it, then that recognition is evidence that you can receive it. Okay. All right, Srinivas.
Now the question and answer. So I invite two people to come on with us. One is Dr. Mrs. Mukherjee and one is Mrs. Ramlakshmi. A short introduction of the both people on dais. So the both speakers will be given a chance to. Now the time is 6:40, so for half an hour probably. Short bio of the two guests on the dais. Mrs. Ramalakshmi, she did her masters in the US about 20 years back, and she had moved to India. And for the last 20 years, she has been very active in the electronic media and has been the CEO of major TV channels like Ma TV, Bhakti TV, Sri Venkateswara Bhakti channel, and Sakshi, and presently the CEO of our channel today. And being very busy, she at least came to my house 3 to 4 times. And every time she saw the picture of Satsang, she would ask a question related to Satsang. So, Madam, this is your golden opportunity.
Sir, sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
And second is my very close friend, Dr. Mukherjee. He is by far the busiest cardiologist in the both states combined. But I think his time has come. So,
You got roped in.
so I invite both of you to ask what
First, do you want to go, sir? Satsriji, thank you so much for the opportunity. I might be asking some very, very fundamental questions. The major question is what is the purpose of life? How would I know why I'm born? What decides? How do I decide? What to do? There are several ways in front of us. So, first of all, how do we decide what is our purpose of life?
Beautiful. It's the right question. I found that there's 4 questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? And how do I live? The 4th is the most important, and that's why Dharma. That we actually all have a track of our life that we're to live. We're in the process of following that track. We manifest our unique expression of a potential from which we all arise, which we're to actualize. It comes through our parents, through their parents, through our ancestral karma, both good and bad. The things that limit us, the things that strengthen us, the things that are aligned with the purpose of life and things that are not aligned with the purpose of life. When we find our Dharma as individuals coming into life, life becomes more full, more rich, more satisfying. We become more connected to our individual self. We have a better sense of self-worth. We start valuing the person we are. That's the first arc of life as human beings, is to find the way of living in life that brings us bliss, that brings us happiness, that brings us a sense of purpose. So it's no doubt. This creation is here for one, what I call original intent. It arose from a field of potentiality prior to existence. This is the absolute. This is the sought. This is what exists prior to existence. We all carry a piece of that principle as our soul, a piece of non-existence. So the soul isn't a thing. It's something like an opening into no thing, into that which was before existence. So each of us carry as our animating force this opening, which through us comes the drive to exist, the need to be alive, to experience, to know, to grow. You can see it in the younger forms of existence, in the striving of animal life to survive and to succeed. But it evolves, it becomes more complex, more subtle, as the forms become more organized, more sophisticated. So us human beings are the most sophisticated form for that drive to be manifest through. And it brings with us in our bodies, the human body, in our sophisticated nervous system, in our physical brain, a capacity to come into existence with a that's much greater than any other species. And in fact, the quality of what we are is we're basically the earth waking up to itself through each of us. In another sense, we're the Sat, that original potentiality waking up to itself as each of us in existence, experiencing and learning and growing in the process of our life. And so lives that we live through this individual expression will be those things that are aligned with our Dharma and those things that aren't aligned with our Dharma. And eventually, by doing it wrong, we figure out how to do it right. And that's the evidence of the maturation of the human being. The maturation of the human being is they're more effective. They're more open and fluid. They can see outside and beyond the perspective of their wounding or their need or their desire. And they can begin to come into life purposefully to serve something greater. So back for me, to serve as an architect was to bring something from heaven to earth. As an artist does, he brings something out of nothing and makes it a drawing. An architect takes an idea and makes it real. I believe this is what Dharma is. It's us being able to bring in that possibility and find out how to live in such a way that that possibility can be more fully expressed. I do know that for me, that was the qualifier for what had happened to me. It happened all at once. Other people I work with, most people I work with, happens incrementally over time. As we complete structures in ourselves that are still resistant or damaged or wounded, we become more and more open to sensing that purpose within ourselves, and our lives become more and more successful, if not this life, the next life, and so on and so forth, until we come to the point where the arc of our human life is fulfilled enough that the spiritual path can begin. And then it has its own Dharma, unique. But the manifestation of that spiritual Dharma, of our awakening, also has to be manifested to what's remaining in our lived life. So we take whatever skills we develop in the life of our awakening, and we can manifest it proportionally, how well we've been able to align with our Dharma. So the new Dharma is the spiritual Dharma. It's a new paradigm for living with a different set of principles than human survival or success.
Guruji, is it like Swadharma, what Bhagavad says about Swadharma? So new Dharma is something where we realize what is our Swadharma? Is it like that?
Did you say Satya Dharma?
Swadharma, that's
Swadharma.
our own response.
Yes, the Swadharma is part of the individual nature. That would be the correct term for that. You know, the Gita speaks of the 4 personality types, and we're all, be it astrology or be it any way we want to define it, we're all carried with different capabilities, but it's not bound in the same way as the traditional Vedas say it, because we all have a little bit of a Sudra in us, all have a little bit of a Vaishya in us, a little bit of the Kshatriya in it, a little bit of the Brahmin in us. So in fact, it's the evolving human being. The more they can know the Sudra, the more they can know the Vaishya, the more they can know the Vaishya, the more they can know the Kshatriya, the more they can know the Kshatriya, the more they can know the Brahmin. But if you only know the Brahmin, then you miss out the other 3 parts of yourself. You lose the ability to bring it into your life. So that's why so many spiritual traditions leave behind the world to just live into that Brahmanic state, the field of Brahman. And they miss the fullness of the opportunity that the universe intended for us, which is to manifest it. And that's the unique thing of the Bhagavad Gita. It's not about destroying the ego. It's about playing our role in the unfolding of the collective consciousness. So that's the opportunity of a fully integrated, Sri Aurobindo called it integral yoga, or the synthesis of yoga, a fully integrated personality where we meet all the parts of ourselves know the who we are with the what we are, then we're a more perfect instrument for the Satya Dharma instead of the Dharma we were born with.
And the way you explained about your experience, we can see the happiness. We can at least, though we don't know how it would be, but we can see through you that it must be a great experience. But such a beautiful, great experience, which is natural for a human being, that should happen. Why the process is so tough? Like sadhana, meditation is the toughest thing. Like the very first few stages, we feel very sleepy, and the same person. I want to do sadhana, I want to do meditation, and when I close my eyes, I myself produce some thoughts. So who is this wanting to do meditation, and who is producing the thoughts? Both are happening in me. How can I separate these two?
Takes time. Takes time.
Takes time, tough time.
Yes, takes time. Because the bottom line of it is the thing that wants to do the sadhana is the expression of the current. That's true to you at this stage. The part of you that can't do the sadhana or is deciding you're not able to do the sadhana, right, is part of your ego that says, I'm not good enough, I can't do this because it doesn't happen right off the bat. If I can't do it right off the bat, then why bother? Let's find something else that's more fun, right? So the principle here is you can only do meditation right off the bat if you've already reached that stage of maturity. Otherwise, you have to practice meditating, and there is a powerful benefit in practice. Because the thing that makes it hard is your ego. Ego is not a verb. I mean, it's not a noun, it's a verb. It's a moving activity of thought and feeling and doing. It's basically a habitual pattern of operating in existence. And it's a machine that has its own momentum. It goes this way. So spiritual practice is meant to stop moving this way and to start moving this way. So what happens is the momentum doesn't want you to move that way. It wants you to move this way. Because you're used to thinking, you're used to planning, you're used to worrying, you're used to wanting, you're used to complaining, you're used to judging and condemning, you're used to all this negativity. The whole separative idea of ego is fear and separation, loss, need, want, desire. So it's got a powerful momentum, not only in you, but all your neighbors and your family and your friends and your whole culture. So when you start practicing yoga, when you start consciously taking actions that are contrary to that, of course they're going to be hard. Guaranteed. If you're more mature, they'll be less hard, or you'll have more determination. But it's going to be hard at first. So that's why I say the art of yoga is persistence. Every single day, your ego is egoing. So every single day, your being needs to have a chance to be. So meditation is to set out at least a segment of your day where you're not doing ego. Now, of course, you're sitting in your chair, trying to meditate, egoing. I mean, it's reasonable from the view of the ego that you be defeated in trying to stop being what you've been up to now. But in fact, that's what you want to do. You want to stop being the ego, which means you have to meet the thoughts that were going on all the time that you're too busy to notice because you were doing so much. When you sit silent and stop doing, you start learning how to be, which is non-doing. And to be is how you become a channel or an instrument. So you have to shut up, sit still, be quiet. And you have to train yourself to do so. So you start with a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but you keep expanding it until you get to 45 minutes, twice a day. If you can sit silent and still for 45 minutes, twice a day, it doesn't make any difference what you experience or what happens. It could be the worst 45 minutes of your life. You could want to be any place but sitting there, being quiet and still. Yet it will be the most effective, transformative practice or action you can take in your day, guaranteed, bar none. Since you've now met me, in this process, the force I carry will empower that quality in you that is capable of meditation. And you'll see it in this room if you haven't felt it already, a quieting occurring in your system. and a slowing down and a greater being. And by the end of the session, we'll have a 10-minute sitting so you can actually just notice what happens for you. And this is pretty much assisting the shoot, the little shoot of your being that comes out of the seed of your soul by ejecting, like miracle growth substance that allows the meditation to be more tolerable at first. So if it's intolerable, guaranteed, you're standing still amidst the current of your ego. The more you're standing still in the midst of the current of your ego, it's like a rock against a stream that's moving very fast. It's very uncomfortable. It wants to throw you into the stream. It wants to thrust you, take you on its journey. The more you choose not to go there, the more you choose to keep coming back to just being silent and still, the more you meet that in you, which is not truth, and the whole stream starts slowing down. Because you're the central player in this whole thing. Your thoughts are secondary. You're the one who gave power to your thoughts. Your feelings are secondary. You're the one who made your feelings important. Your body sensations, pain or pleasure, these are the ones you've made empowered to be the issues. So when you withdraw your consent, by sitting for those times, you assert the authority that comes with the central quality of yourself. And you start collaborating with that error of ego in your life, and you begin to recover the true authority, the true chooser, the one who can stop being sucked into the negative, destructive, or adharmic actions. You'll see more clearly. You'll be more present. You'll have less fear. You'll have a greater sense of your purpose. You'll have greater clarity about what to do next. Every aspect of your existence will start revealing its nature, both where you've obscured yourself, or parts of you that are hidden out that you've never wanted to meet, or the parts of you that's still addicted to being a person and what the payoffs in your life and the things you're attached to. You'll see them all. And in that process, recover the truth of what you are, who is other than all those things. So in my teaching, you don't have to do any practices. You don't have to do any pranayams. You can. If it helps, if you have a mantra that helps, use the mantra at first. But ultimately, you sit in the chair, relaxed, don't speak, don't move, no matter what. Phone rings, house is on fire, don't move. Stay in your chair for that 45 minutes twice a day. You will assert that true authority that's part of your central consciousness in your life more quickly than any other practice you can do. And you can have faith that this is purposeful, that this will take you to somewhere because I just told you so. But also because you'll discover it in your own experience. You'll discover how much better you are when you stop being you in that old way. And you start becoming the you that's truer, more connected, more in relationship with existence. Everything in your life starts improving. You start seeing how you're causing your own pain, how you're causing your own limitation, how your fear stories dominate your idea of what's possible for your future, or how your past has determined how you feel about your self-worth or your worth. You start discovering the untruth of the structures that keep us in an identity of a negative sense of self. And you start in process empowering a quality of ourself that is not dependent on what we have or what we accomplish, or if other people see it. It doesn't need an outer result because it's satisfied with its own existence, with its own day, with its own action. So this is the new yoga. This is the new Dharma. Okay.
Waiting to practice that question.
Yeah, you'll start tonight if you haven't done it before. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir, for the opportunity. When Srinivas told me that once you are in the room with Satsri, you will experience most powerful moments. That's what he told me. When you are just folding your hands and then moving your hands around me, those are the most powerful meditative moments I've ever experienced in my life. And so I'm really afraid that what the 10 minutes more are going to do to me.
You should be celebrate whatever.
Why am I afraid of that? Why am I afraid of that?
Because the habit of the ego is based on fear. It's based on separateness. It's based on not enough. Because of the trauma of taking on a body as a soul, when we come into a human body, it's so limited. We're so vulnerable that it creates a stamp in the core design of our identity that makes us afraid of change, afraid of not being able to meet the world, of not being good enough. So we carry the residue of that trauma within us. And then we have life events that happen that feed that trauma. And that's the basis of the fear. So the art of this is to feel the fear as a sensation in your body, rather than, because fear is mostly from the mind. Oh my God, I'm not going to be able to function. Oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do the things I've wanted to do. But none of that is a problem when you come to the right relationship with that. So you come out of your head and you put yourself in your heart and you become aware of your body. Don't believe the fear. By withdrawing your attention from that which fears, it quiets, because it's your unwitting consent to be afraid of something you don't yet know that is stopping you from being able to trust something your heart knows, your soul knows is right. But it doesn't, matter of fact, if there is greater fear, it means the soul knows that its time has come, but the human ego has prevented it. So it means the ego knows its time is up. In the Gita, it's when they started blowing the conchs in the first chapter, where we had the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and finally the Arjuna and Krishna together start blowing their conchs after Bhishma, and that is the call of battle. Everybody, what was going on in their system was fear. But in fact, it was also excitement that the battle has begun. So fear is actually good if you can just see that it's just afraid to come into life beyond the boundary of what it's known before. So it's a good sign. It goes to show you that you'll get a lot of benefit from letting the energy come in. And if you follow my instructions to practice so you can meditate 45 minutes twice a day, anytime in your day, morning and night, you'll start building a greater trust and confidence in that quality that can respond to the energy and also open up your connection to this transmission in a way that can help empower you in your journey.
What is the goal of this journey of consciousness? Okay, let us say I received the flow, I received the attainment, and then what? So I teach others. So what is the entire goal?
This is ego's favorite question. What am I going to get out of this? What's it going to cost me and what I'm going to get? I'm going to decide if the cost or the benefits are worth it. Okay, it's a perfectly natural, true question when it comes from that point. So I'm looking at how to speak to how it is to be me. Okay, I'll try to give you an idea of where it goes. First thing that happens, none of those things become important. The cost or the benefit. The costs become something you're more than willing to pay because the experiential quality of coming into existence outside, when you let go of those costs, becomes so much greater than whatever your ego imagined. Now, I went to India for the first 6 years. Those years, I was a upper middle class American, right? I lived in a room with no windows, just had screens. And I lived there year round in Tiruvannamali. So temperatures were 110, 115. I couldn't eat the food given by the by the ashram. So I ate cucumbers, tomatoes, cheese, bread, and carrots. Peanut butter. Thank you. Probably the only substantial protein I got. And my life just went reduced down to the metal decks, the metal chair, the hard bed with no pillows. And everywhere I went, I had to learn to sit. With no cushion. So the first couple of years in India was learning to sit. So the whole thing is, I had no life. I was a guy who worked 16 hours a day. And even though I was having these great experiences, I was still caught up in that busy. Here I had nothing to do. I had these wonderful states coming periodically, but in between it was hell, especially in the monsoon. Mosquitoes and insects and bugs, like, where did all these different kinds of ants come from? And they're all trying to eat me. And I can't stop them from coming in. So, yes, it was a dismantling of everything that organized about what I had organized my life around before. All of that had to fall away. And of course, because it happened so suddenly and because it kept coming, it was easier for that reason. But even if you stay in the world, you'll meet the cost of letting go of your ego relative to your ego, because it's your identity. You create layers of who I am and what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I'm willing to experience, what I'm not willing to experience. What do I risk? What do I resist? And what do I accept? The structures of resistance are like Velcro. You know, the material that goes rip when you take it apart? So when you start undoing the patterns of your ego, it's like a ripping of yourself. Like you're ripping off a layer of skin at times relative to your old way of being. But the quality of each time you go through a process of that undoing, even though it may be difficult, immediately a quality of your being comes to fill the gap. That was before filled by what you had to do today, what you needed to do, who you're trying to please, making sure that everybody liked you so nobody would reject you so you could get what you want in life, and making sure that when you got it, you could hang on to it and keep it safe and make sure it was there for the future or for your kids or whatever. All that, stopping that is like a death to the ego. But the being grows every time the ego dies a little. So there's this process of trading out the old way for the new way. So how can you know it's worth it? The core of your being, where the soul arises, there's the soul and then the being. It's the one that wants to do this. The human ego doesn't want to do it. The human ego is not truth. The core of your being is truth. When the core of your being can come more into your life, you're living a more true life. And to live a more true life is the best life possible. You're alive. You're connected. You're getting it. You're feeling free from fear, free from obligation, free from guilt or shame, free from the whole things that bind to keep us stuck in our ego identity. You start experiencing life in its immediacy. I mean, Buddhism talks about be here now, but that's like a mental practice until you actually can be here now. And when you can't be here now, you don't want to do anything else but be here now. So you don't need to practice because it's what you want to do all the time. This is also happens in meditation. You practice meditation. At some point, all you want to do is meditate. I got lots of people around me that all they want to do is meditate. And then I have to put them to work so they don't get lost in just meditating, just being a bunch of beings sitting around. So I hope that gives you a sense.
True. I was just afraid of being just for the sake of being meditating. That's what I was afraid of. Would I let go the life as it is? That's what
The bottom line of it, when you come from your being, your life becomes a miracle. Every day is new. Every relationship is new. Every moment is not a repeat of the past, but a fresh opportunity for coming into existence. Complete different paradigm.
You just received the super conscious just like that. Why did you do the Vishnu Sahasranama, and why did you take the help of Bhagavad Gita to impart the same thing to others?
Well, because I didn't have a language. I didn't have an understanding. It was all happening naturally, but I didn't have a tradition. See, that's the problem with the West right now. They have no paradigm for holding the awakening that's happening all throughout Europe and America. And so they're always being misdiagnosed. People are having these wonderful experiences, but they're afraid of them. And they go to their psychiatrist or their therapist, or they try to get away from them, not recognizing it's a blessing. They think it's a curse. And there's a lot of suffering in the West because of this no understanding of the nature of the unfolding of the spiritual possibility outside of dogma, outside of belief systems. So the Gita and the Vedas became a way of organizing my languaging so that I could communicate it back into the West. That's why. You'll see if you watch the videos, I've created my own languaging. So I have a very Western interpretation of the Gita. But the principle is that we're all, as a species, no longer bound by the past. In the past, this force was not as available. It wasn't as close to the planet. So therefore, you had to work harder. You had to get away from life. You had to renounce your family and renounce all those things. Or it had to be at the end of your life as a householder, and you went into the forest. I see the sannyasis sitting around Tiruvannamali every time I come. They have to relinquish their lives in order to be able to do it, but that's no longer needed. You can learn to connect to that being that you are and bring it into your life, and then your life starts changing, transforming into a complete different way for you, because your relationship changes, even if the life appears to stay the same. But it doesn't actually. Once you change, everyone around you starts changing. Your life gets better the more you get better. So we begin to discover that we're create our own reality. So when we discover our being, we discover a trueness that can establish itself in the parts of our lives that are true and the parts of our life that are still not true. Parts of our life that's aligned with that trueness and parts of our life that's not aligned with that trueness. And automatically it starts healing and aligning with the opportunity that life really is, because that's the purpose of life, which we've been living every other way. And especially for an Indian trained in the Western ways, you actually not know the being in your body more than Westerners, because your body is an Indian body that carries the Vedas within the cells of your body. So you take on this coding of being a Westerner, and something that is self-evident truth, if you just pay attention to, you've been ignoring your whole life because you think you want to be like Westerners. So that you, as an Indian culture, have actually more natural receptivity, except for this added structure that you've put on top of your natural cultural history. And dissolving that structure for you will be easier than a Westerner who carries ancestral karma for, 20, 30 lifetimes. There you go.
You said in the book, I just started reading your book because I thought I was coming here today. I thought I would know all about what you have written. So I purchased the book on Amazon this morning. Then I started reading that.
Yeah. Is that how you studied for your exam? Last minute, huh?
Yeah. So in that, you mentioned that some of the parts of your teaching are still a theory, and then you wanted to validate that. That's what I have read.
Well, say it again. So say it again. Some parts of my book.
In the introduction, you have written that parts of what you are teaching are still theory, so you wanted to validate it. You only wanted to validate it.
It's
how you are planning.
I'm doing
to
it right
validate
now.
Yeah.
I am speaking to something that's already happening. I'm pointing it out because it's not something new. It's actually there already. It's just obscured. So when you can learn to pay attention to the symptoms that are happening, like the quieting of the thoughts. See, if you're used to living in your mind's not going to be there when there's a quieting of the thoughts. So you're not going to notice that your thoughts are quieting. And as soon as you ask the question, am I thinking? You're going to start thinking. So you have to have another place of being. So you have to put your consciousness more in your body. And then from there, you can notice, I'm not thinking of anything.
That's about
Theory.
So speak it again.
Yeah. Yes.
I thought he understood it pretty well, the way he was answering. Yes.
Okay.
You took the theory and took it into practice.
Yeah. So it's not, yes. No, there's two aspects to that, because I don't work from theory. I work from direct experience. So I don't have a theory. I have a direct experience. I don't need a theory. I don't need a mathematical proof. I know the truth of it. And those who come can directly know for themselves. You can directly know in your own experience, because you'll know, starting with who's breathing you. You don't need a theory that you're breathing. You're breathing. Actually, you don't need a theory that you exist. But until you know the truth of you, you may need a theory to understand what it is you are. You may have a temporary construct, an idea, so the mind can collaborate with being something other than it's been. But that takes time. So you have to learn a new kind of languaging, a new set of ways of looking, points of view, of looking at what you've taken for granted or never looked at from that vantage point before, to begin to see the reality of that spiritual truth that you are. The reality, that's why it's called realization, because you realize truth. When you're not in realization, you're the ego. So realizing you're an ego is the first step to realizing you're not truth. So when you're caught up in ego and fear and need and desire and judgment and all the rest of it, then at least you can say, well, I'm definitely not truth right now. And you know what the feels like? It feels like shit. You ever feel what it's like to be ego? It's miserable. It's been so long. I'm so happy not to have to go there unless I want to. And I got a whole new ego now who wants to do everything. So, you know, the whole paradigm shifts once we gain enough authority over that which we didn't know before. And there's your theory. Until you can know it, just know it's this simple.
Guruji, traditionally we were taught devotion towards God helps us to realize more, is one of the easiest paths to
Absolutely.
realize God. So what is the role of devotion in New Dharma?
Devotion is the recognition of your being, of the truth. Devotion is an experience, right? Did you know that? Did you know the feeling of devotion is an experience?
It is an experience.
Okay, and that's first you got to find out it's an experience. You have an idea of devotion, then you have the feeling of devotion. The idea of devotion, it doesn't mean ain't much, but the feeling of devotion, that's the current of life being felt that is connecting to something more greater than itself. So the feeling of devotion, by the way, can be there as an awareness. It doesn't have to be, you can have a sense of something greater, but no experience. That I call aspiration. If you have an aspiration for something greater, that's in the awareness domain. If you have an experience of something greater, it's in the experiential domain, and that's devotion. They're both connected. It just depends what part of your system is more open. If your awareness, which is your mental nature, is more open, it'll be an aspiration, which is also being felt in the body, but you may not notice it. But if the heart opens, it can feel it as an experience. That's the tangible sense of love. Unconditional, personal love. God loves you more than you can possibly know. To feel that love creates a response in your body that says, yes. That wants more of that love. That's devotion. The more you follow devotion, the stronger becomes the current that takes you to the object of your devotion, be it a person or be it an idea, be it a principle, as long as it's felt, because that current is empowered by your attention. So the art of aspiration and the art of devotion is that when it comes, pay attention to it. When you attend to something, you power it. You're the source of power. You're what makes things come into existence. When you attend to something, you make it real. You give your power to it, it becomes more important. You can give your power to your problem. Notice how big your problem becomes. The more you worry about your power, the bigger it is and the less power you have. Right? The more you take attention away from your problem, the less power it has over you. It's the same thing with devotion or aspiration. The more you attend to your awareness, to your aspiration, or the more you attend to your experience, your devotion, the more you power that current, and that's why you meditate. You meditate because both the aspiration and the devotion is an experience that occurs in the biology of your body. Your body knows how to respond to the current intuitively. By just recognizing that it's happening, allowing it to happen for 45 minutes twice a day is enough to have it come forward in your life more and more fully. So absolutely, for me, it was devotion. It was first aspiration. The first night, oh my God. And the next day it was, oh my God. And there was two versions of God, the absolute and the Shakti. both manifesting. So of course, all I have to do is feel that. And whenever it would come, I'd stop doing whatever I needed to do. And I'm a guy who was busy. Took me 9 months to dismantle my life because I had so much busyness doing until I could be able to give my full attention to that. And that's when the real challenge and tests came, when I came to India, where there was no more the dismantling of my ego, and all there was this great welcoming of the current. And it started taking me to meeting ancestral structures and pieces of my culture and pieces of my consciousness, of my part of my collective consciousness that I inherited from my ancestors that were part of the foundational identity of my personality. These were very difficult to recognize, to be with, but it was my devotion and my aspiration that knew this was what to do. When you feel the devotion will know it's true because the devotion will increase. If the aspiration meets something that is having trouble with and it moves through it, the aspiration will increase. It'll be a recognition of the truth of it in your own experience. There's a whole different way of doing spiritual practice. If there's any burden that you carry as a culture, it's all the trying to understand it. It's all the philosophizing and arguing and debating about the terms and what it's meant and who's saying what to who and all that, because this is the direct thing. This is where it came from the rishis. It was once fresh like this. It was once alive and simple and direct like this. But over the thousands of years, it's become so convoluted and so loaded down with dogma and rules and what you should do and what you shouldn't do, you can't find anything. But what you're looking to find is the most obvious and the most simple thing. So if you think of what the rishis did, all they did was say, how is it that I exist? Their lives were simple. There was no religion. There was nobody teaching them what to do. They were simply survival, and they had enough leisure, men and women. They could say, how is it that I exist? Well, if I exist, what had to have happened for me to exist? What does that say about the tree of life of which I'm a fruit of? What are the principles? So this is what I can bring. I can bring a fresh recognition of the foundation of what we now call spirituality versus material life. There's no difference. The separation happened through the development of the human ego and the human mind. They are simply two currents, two expressions of the same current into existence. Yes. You finish.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So we have 40 minutes more. I invite anyone in the audience to come forward and ask a question. If you are not willing to come forward, you can just raise your hand, we'll pass on the mic. But ideally, I would like you to come here where I'm standing and ask questions.
Okay, go ahead and have it just leave the microphone on the chair. Yeah, you got sucked in, son of a bitch. Please come forward. Yeah. She's gonna. Can you hear her up there? Would you sit over here? Yeah, have her sit right here, and the chair nearest to me.
You can sit here.
Yeah. Yeah. Move the chair closer. There you go. Yeah. Just say your name.
My name is Susila.
Sita.
Susila.
Sutita.
Susila.
Okay, thank you. She hears better than I do.
Whenever I think about God, whenever I see somebody, I can't control my emotion. I have tears. Forgive me for that.
Whoa, no. You are blessed. You are blessed. This is devotion. Devotion is you are recognizing God. And ultimately you'll see God in everything. You'll be a mess. You'll be crying at everything. Let it be that way. Let it be that current, let it take over your life and let you be completely lost in the divinity everywhere.
Guruji, I didn't know anything about God. I didn't know anything about anything in this world. But I have my heart, I used to think why things happen the way they say and why is it happening. When you trust God, you don't do harm to anybody and you don't do bad things. So I never prayed to God thinking, why is it so? And then you pray to the God and come back and you come out and do something else entirely. So I never prayed. I don't know how to pray. I don't know do anything at all. So one day I decided I want to know God. I don't know the name of the God or anything like that, but my mother-in-law blessed me once, so I used to chant that. And the things you said, some of the things happened to me, but I didn't know what they were.
That's right. It's happening. This is that you are at this stage of devotion means that things have happened all along. That brings you to this recognition of that your being now knows God.
And sometimes I didn't know the time. I didn't do anything to that things to come through me.
That's right.
I only had one question, who am I? I could hear it in my mind. So I used to call him, Universal Father, come and help me. This is middle of the night. And then things used to happen. And I used to tell my son, who is in California, he said, Mom, don't go to any psychiatrists and doctors.
Don't go to psychiatrists or doctors. Yeah.
Because they
Good
don't
advice.
know what's happening to
Yeah.
you.
So when did this start?
I think I was 42, between 42, I think.
Okay.
46.
And how old are you now?
I'm about 70 now.
So, okay. So it's been 28 years.
Yes. So I sit and I disappear. I don't know where I was, but this continuous happiness, bliss. And I didn't see certain times any other, only me. Me means not this body,
Right.
this continual universal consciousness.
The one me. Our me's are all pieces of the one me. You know, we are parts of this one me. We all have the same common basis for our identity. It's just less personal when you're in touch with everyone else's me, but the experience is just what she's saying, this incredible feeling of love, of blessing.
And whenever I need any help in that path, they suddenly appear. They just suddenly appear. I had a guru coming from India, my mother-in-law's guru.
Okay.
He came to England because I was continually asking God, people say all these things, but I don't understand. I need a guru. I can't practice it without a guru because a lot of things are happening in the mind. So he came, he rang me from America. He said, Susita, I want to come and see you. And he came. And even now, I don't understand. But I'm separated by my universal father now for a long time. I think the ego must be there. Unless I empty completely, he can't fill me up because there is already so much water in the glass house. Glass can't take any more water. So all I ask you is, if you know, how can I meet my universal father ever again? I miss him so much. He loved me more than anybody, anything in this universe. I can't explain it to you. You know that. I think there must be a lot of ego in my body. Otherwise, he wouldn't have disappeared.
It's mostly in your mind. It's mostly the mind. So do you have a meditation practice?
I used, like you said, I never used to think that's meditation. Meditation came to me.
Right. Natural meditation.
But now it doesn't come as much.
So this is a good time. The Gita says that you never stop acts of sacrifice, charity, and austerity because the world clogs the pores. It clogs up the channels. So 45 minutes, twice a day, just sitting, relaxed, silent, still, feel your body, let the devotion come, feel the God. because God's wanting to come to you. It's this old habit of you.
Yes.
So if you keep this up, I would say within a week or so, God will come to you again. Because the mind, this part where you go retreating is partly because of the people you live with or the work environment. You're picking it up from people around you. Because once we universalize, it's no longer ourselves. We're getting connected to everyone. So we tend to take on what other people have. So this is why in the traditions, most tradition, you get away from material-minded people. So the spiritual quality of you can gain more authority. Devotion doesn't look for that authority. It just wants to feel love, right? I just want to know Krishna. I just want to feel Krishna. You don't want to, like Ramakrishna said, I want to taste sugar. I don't want to be sugar. So where this goes to is the next stage is you being sugar, just tasting sugar, because this devotion can't stop. It'll go into anguish. It'll go into pain. It'll go into the agony. Devotion has that point where it's, I cannot tolerate being separate for that which I am devoted to. That agony is what's burning out what's left that separates you. So there is some time for the agony. But the other part of it is also recognizing that, understanding that you are that which you're devoted to in truth, even though right now, because once you start doing that, you start kind of waking up into another relationship to God, where God will give you a mission. He will give you a task. And what your job would be to bring this devotion, to be a channel for this oneness to those who come to you.
And then thing I noticed, two forces were in me. And when I'm going towards God, these two forces were fighting each other.
Yes.
And one day I looked at the mirror. I was in Canada. And I said, no power on this earth can take me,
Very good.
except for my universal Father. I will not surrender to you. And then that night I died. And I saw my body on the bed. But there is this thing watching that. And then light came and hit me. And I was alive. And a lot of the time I used to see my body was walking, but I wasn't walking. And I couldn't feel any temperatures in this world. But now I feel everything. And
Okay, so you've integrated. So that what there is the human ego has a truth to it.
yes,
It stands alone in the universe.
yes,
So, and then what's devotional is the being, which is like a child. The being is like a newborn child. And all it wants to do is be with the father or the mother. But who's the father and the mother? This quality, this portion of the I amness that stands alone in itself, whole and complete. Then you find the Shiva within ourself.
yes.
You already have the Shakti. It's already come. So I already can recognize it. So when the Shiva comes, right now the Shakti has been stronger, and the Shiva comes and it matches the Shakti, you'll be in your full authority. Then you will be simple again. This trauma will be gone. You'll be clear. And you'll be clear that the current has a purpose for you. And they will show up.
And one day I asked my universal Father down, universal Father, anybody, children, they call upon their father, they will come and help you straight away. But all your children are suffering. Why did you put Maya on them and made them born into human beings?
You're speaking from the mother. You're speaking from the Divine Mother. Why are my children suffering? The mother, however, is also the father, but she's looking through a lens of the mother. And the father would say, because they have to learn, because they have to grow. The father's always the one who puts the discipline. It's the one that said, you just endure calmly, put up with it. It's not going to go your way. What do you think? You're not a kid anymore? Grow up, get tough. So the nature of the authority in you is the one that can recognize that your children need this suffering to grow. And some are coming from very primitive states. And the only way people in the primitive states learn is through physical suffering. And then unwittingly, they will cause suffering in others, and then they learn through that. So you have to allow this unfolding of this dimension, because this dimension only Only suffering exists for human beings.
But
Nothing else in existence suffers like human beings suffer. Every other animal, every other species is in the oneness. So when the body falls away, they're the oneness. But it's only in human beings that we can get so separate from the oneness that we suffer. We blame ourselves. We become diminished. We become unworthy. This is the original sin that Catholicism or Christianity speaks to. It's a fundamental error in the inability to recognize that suffering serves in its own way.
this is the first time I met you face to face, but I heard your
Thoughts?
speeches and I knew
You knew what you were becoming.
Namaste, Guruji. I took a lot of time.
Put the chair on the chair. It was perfect. Thank you.
Sorry if I took anybody's time.
No. It was all the time. You have all the time in the world. See, this is what we are. We are divine in truth. We're not suffering, miserable, separated ego and all our compensating structures because we had to live with ourselves being separate and suffering. We're this glorious thing. I see the glorious things. There's no doubt in my mind who you are, what you are. There's no doubt. I don't need to have doubt because I have a direct experience of what you are. So may it be for you. So may you find that for yourself. This is why I do this work. This is the call that comes to every soul who comes to sufficient maturity that they're able to play a part for the world. And this is what I teach. I teach that it's time to grow up. It's time to take responsibility for the planet. It's time to take responsibility for the truth of who we are. It's time to be in truth in life. Because right now the world's terribly, terribly distraught and distracted from its true nature. This is the time of peril for the world, as we know. And the world is basically becoming inhabitable for human beings if we keep going the way we're going. We're killing the mother that created this opportunity. So this awakening is not an accident. This is a confluence of forces so that the opportunity of humanity, the possibility that humanity carries, can cross this threshold. That's what it is. The darkness always comes before the dawn. This is a form of darkness. Even though there's material prosperity and tremendous technologies and tremendous discoveries in science, we're in the darkness of the soul. If we can pierce through this boundary, if the species can cross this threshold, we will have both material prosperity and awakened beings. And that sets a whole new precedence beyond all history of mankind up to now. So I know what the possibility is, and this is why I speak, and this is why Satsang and myself and all who have come and supported this happening even today, is that a recognition in the core of them that this is wanted and needed, just not only for themselves and their family and those they're connected to, but for the world. We heal the world through each of us. We are all an expression of the problem. We are all 7.8 billionth of the problem. When we resolve the problem within ourselves, then we become useful. Then we can serve the world. Okay, one more. Someone else? Yes, come forward.
Excuse me. Okay, this is mainly for my kids.
Okay, but what's your name?
I'm Dr. Aparna.
Bella.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they keep asking me what happens after death. They see in the newspapers and, everything on TV. There's so much death around, fear. So every alternate day, my 7-year-old and my 11-year-old, they have a discussion on death.
Interesting. This is coming up in your life.
Yes.
What's your answer? What do you tell them?
I keep telling them, you will be born as your favorite person if you do good in this life.
A little religion right there. Be good and you'll get what you want. you know, like the Muslim, you know, you'll have 16 wives waiting for you. Or whatever. Okay. More than you can handle, I'm sure.
So how can I answer them? How can I give them a reasonable answer? I mean,
Well, first you have to understand, how can I give them a reasonable answer is the question. Yeah, the reasonable question to what happens when you die. Yes. So the question the children are asking is what happens when you die. Well, that question came to me when I was 17 and I was been selected for the draft to fight in the Vietnam War at the beginning of the Vietnam War. And it became very clear to me, because my brother was already drafted, that I could die. And it became a problem that I didn't know how to be with. How can I die? I just got born. I just came into existence as a person. How is it that I could die? And that question sent me into an inquiry. I read philosophy, I read psychology, I read, when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, my whole life became absorbed in trying to answer that question. There was no answer. The mind cannot answer, because what dies is the mind. However, the knowingness comes. The sense of our personhood, our individuality is there. The knowingness is there. The ability to know without thinking is there. So just like when we're born, we go through a birth canal. We get to come out of our expanded spiritual state and we enter into a body and go into a contracted existence where we forget everything. And then we're born in this incredibly vulnerable but sensatorially incredible sensory world. And then it takes years and years to get organized until we become a person again. Somewhere in our 9 years old or 5 years old, each child's different. So does death have its transition? So at the moment of death, how we transition in part has to do with how we lived. So the more awake we are, the more connected we are, the more we've been aligned with the truth of us, then we stay awake in that transition. Otherwise, we go to sleep and we go through stages of being asleep. Now, I first discovered this after my awakening, and I'm in India. I have nothing else to do. So I'm visiting all the subtle worlds, all the planes that exist beyond this plane. There are many more planes beyond this plane than this plane, including this huge universe. And I started experiencing people who had died, and I experienced my grandfather who had died 20 years ago. He had died and he didn't know he died. That's because he was an alcoholic and he drank about a gallon of wine every day. So he didn't know he was dead. Been dead for 20 years. And he saw me and he was complaining to me about this latest infection that won't heal and this thing over here, and the doctors don't know anything. And curiously, in his living room, he had 2 people in hospital beds laying there. He didn't notice it was unusual. So I saw that vision. I saw him see me and I saw him. And then about a few weeks later, I saw him again. And he had come out of that quasi-dream state and was now reliving his life. I call it the ancestral plane, where he was reliving, literally, tangibly reliving his life. And I saw him holding the hand of my father, who was a young man at that time, 4 or 5 years old. He was wearing his suspenders. He was much younger. And I just had a picture. Saw him. He saw me. That was done. And then a few weeks later, a month later, I saw him and my grandmother, that I've already seen, sitting in chairs in oneness, just sitting together in oneness. I knew he had transitioned out through the dark tunnel, which he had self-created through his alcoholism. But what allowed him to come out of it was connecting with someone who was in the body who could see him. And that allowed him to make the transition. But for most human beings, we do it naturally. Just like birth into childhood and late childhood is a natural unfolding, so is death. The more awake we are, the more quickly we move to come to the true authority, which you can awaken to this life. So then when you die, it's just like, okay, I don't have to come back. Good. Now I can move on. There is not any attachment to what you were. It's like shedding a skin, or like a butterfly, a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. you come into existence with a whole other domains of possibilities where you can grow without the same degree of suffering, the same degree of limitation or pain. So what we do is when we transition is varies to each person, but you don't lose yourself. You might go unconscious, but what you'll become is connected in a positive way to more of what we really are, rather than just the person we think we are, or our stories about it, what other people believe, and so on and so forth. So, hey, don't worry about it. You were born, right? You got here. Sure, you'll get out of here, and it will be a continuation of something that is yet for you to discover this life. The thing that will help best is when you can find out for yourself. You don't have to die to find this out. You just have to meditate 45 minutes twice a day. Because then you'll be there. And once you find yourself, that truth was never born and never dies. It's here while you're living, but it gets all mucked up. So it'll be the same you are then as you were, except there will be this sense of progression, sense of evolution, of growth in the quality of what you are. This is just one stage of that process. So, how old are your children?
11 and 7.
Pretty bright kids. So, the nature of the question is that the human ego has this question: will I survive my death? So, what if you were a child and someone you were asking your mom, what would you want to hear? Yeah, use the microphone.
I would like to be born again to you. I mean,
If
like
you want
have
to
the
be
same
born
mother,
again,
same
right?
father, same place.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't make that prediction. This is like a roulette wheel, where you get on the roulette wheel and then you pop into whatever family or circumstance is most aligned with your nature, which might not be the one that popped into it. So you don't know. We're in a current, and we're here to work out structures and karma. So maybe your children will have to go through other lifetimes. Maybe they can finish this lifetime. If you can wake up this lifetime, then there's no question. Then you're eternal. You do not die. And you could say that to them. You say, what you are in essence will never die.
Okay, that's easy to say.
Yeah.
You do not die.
You do not die. Not that everything that is part of this life will fall away, but you will continue on.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So, do we have time?
How much time do you have? You're done. You want to meditate?
Okay.
My name is C.V. Rao.
All right.
I was a yoga instructor since 25 years here.
Okay.
Okay. So mine is the simple question, and from last living also 20 years also I am searching for that. How to impart the spirituality among the students. Anyhow, at least it can middle-aged people.
Of course.
So many times only spirituality applies, and searching for the only balded head and old age home, old age type only. But how to attract the spirituality? How to impart the spirituality in the youngsters?
By being it. So it's really a matter of you individually coming into that part of yourself. And obviously, if you've been doing yoga for this long, there is some truth that comes to you when you speak. And they're getting something of that when you speak or when you teach them their yoga processes. And that to whatever extent of receptivity they have, they'll get. You can't control that. You can sing the song, but it'll only be the listeners that will determine if they can hear it.
Yeah.
So but I'll tell you what is the secret to listening. Love. Total recognition of the divinity in your students. So what I would invite you to do is step out of the role of the boss in front of the room, to be equal to the students, and then to connect to each one of them, just to feel and connect to each one of them, and let them see you see them. And then whatever you say will be the perfect song for that room. That's very simple. You move into relationship to those who come to you because through you, they're looking to move into relationship with that truth in themselves. So you help by loving them. Then the love makes them more receptive and they can take in what you have, the song you're singing, and they will be left with some residue feeling, residue knowing, residue determination to continue yoga or to make it more serious. And it makes no difference how old. Most people, I've got an old person spiritual home in Washoe Valley. I mean, it's mostly everybody's over 60 and, we have, and everybody's making very real progress. So part of it is simply the ability to be an empty channel or the universe to come through you rather than you do it. So the Gita talks about no doership. It talks about taking the action and not expecting any result. It talks about letting go of any desire motive that you may have. So when you let go of those two things, trying to get something out of it, or any desire motive to get something out of it, then when you're in the room, you are in the best position to be an instrument or channel for the universe. That's that simple.
Thank you.
It's probably already been happening. Now your ego may not recognize it.
Thank you so much. By realizing at the young stage, at least in the middle age, so many difficulties and misunderstandings will be evaporated. So these are birth and death is general, and general Gita says everything about Krishna like this.
Anything in the mental doesn't
So
serve.
anything is not permanent in the world, but that realization should come at the earlier stage. That will be more beneficial for the future life, at least 20, 30
You could
years
say
next
that,
life.
but the whole secret is the more they can get in touch with their bodies through doing yoga, the more they can know what they are themselves in their own experience. So yoga, no matter what age you are, is about getting in touch with your body. And your body is the best instrument for knowing truth because it doesn't go into the mind. Now, of course, the heart's the next, probably the heart is the strongest. Besides the mind, the heart is even the most powerful intelligence. But if people are not able to access their heart, then the body is the next most powerful. So the yoga prepares them to receive the transmission. So you brought forward a sincere question. Watch what happens now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the only one and only satsang we're doing in Hyderabad. We're doing a little program tomorrow, but it's closed. So this is my hello, goodbye session. I invite you, if you're feeling pulled or called, to tap into the resources. We come to India every year. Next year will be for almost 3 months. So we will look also to support any of you who are interested. We do programs in the United States and we do programs in Europe, as well as the programs we do here in India. And your connection is right now, Srinivas, stand up. Srinivas is doing a Gita study group right now. These Gita study groups are not just mental inquiries into what the Bhagavad Gita, this is an exploration into your nature and your purpose in life. These are quite intensive cauldrons where my force can come into the group and actually have a direct effect on you. So, Srinivas, do you want to announce when your next Gita study group is? Or how to contact you for joining into the Gita study group?
So we are doing every Wednesday evening 6 o'clock. We have a Gita group, Gita session, followed by meditation. The duration will be very from usually 30 minutes Gita, 30 minutes meditation. The Gita we do is a video, YouTube video of that Gita particular chapter, right actually. All of you got 3 Gita books, first chapter, 6 chapters in the first sheet. So there were 2 sources now, one from the video and one from that book. So all of you are welcome to come. My phone number will be there on the messages which you received as an invitation. Please feel free to contact any of these 3 numbers to please come to the New Dharma Hyderabad Gita study group every Wednesday 6. Thank you. All of you are very good.
Okay, very good. All right, so now we're going to practice sitting silent and still. I hesitate to call it meditation. Some of you will be meditation. It's not necessary to be meditation at first. It may be you just meeting how uncomfortable it is to be you. Okay, so it's good to know how uncomfortable it is to be you, because that's how you dissolve the error of why you're uncomfortable, by sitting with it. So this is the father telling the children to shut up and be quiet. Sit still. So all you really need to do is sit still no matter what happens. It may not feel like meditation at all, and it may be wonderful. And if you pay attention to your breath and to what is happening in your body, you can do the most to feel into what's already come to you in this evening. And that will open the door for you being able to find it in your daily life. But without that, meditating twice a day, 45 minutes, all promises are off. You got to do your part. You don't do your part, this will be one event forgotten quickly. All right. Can we turn down the lights? And can we, it's 5:02, can we sit for 10? Okay, Srinivas, any problem for being 5 minutes over? That's okay. Okay, so we're going to sit for 10 minutes. You'll hear the gong start and the gong end, and then I'll leave the room, and then you're free to leave. Ask any questions. There are people who are linked with me who are in the room. Everybody who's linked with me who is in the room, raise your hands. Okay, you can see those people for any questions that you may have. Boy, it's a lot of work. Okay, that's beautiful. That's good.